Environmental and Development Research Management Program, Doctor Program in Environmental Science, and National Defense Insight. The Women's Studies Master Program. Stand with the various interesting facilities. And the best quality. Postgraduate Brawijaya University, reaching the future.
Universitas Brawijaya adalah kampus tujuan paling favorit di Indonesia. Para mahasiswa datang dari berbagai daerah di Indonesia serta dari luar negeri. Universitas Brawijaya semula merupakan yayasan perguruan tinggi bernama Yayasan Perguruan Tinggi Malang pada tahun 1958. Terletak di pusat kota Malang yang terkenal dengan hawa yang segar dan udara yang sejuk, Universitas Brawijaya telah menciptakan lingkungan kampus yang asri. Dengan tata ruang yang terpelihara dengan baik dan didukung oleh tenaga pengajar yang berkualitas, baik dari dalam maupun luar negeri, menjadikan Universitas Brawijaya sebagai kampus yang nyaman dan kondusif untuk proses belajar dan mengajar, serta untuk mengembangkan bakat dan minat. Universitas Brawijaya membuka akses belajar yang seluas-luasnya bagi calon mahasiswa berbakat, termasuk mahasiswa disabilitas. Saat ini, ribuan lebih mahasiswa mendapatkan beasiswa dari berbagai instansi, baik pemerintah maupun swasta. Universitas Brawijaya memiliki 14 fakultas, Pascasarjana, dan program vokasi. Dengan didukung lebih dari 140 guru besar dan 400 dosen peneliti yang berpengalaman mengajar dan meneliti di berbagai bidang ilmu pengetahuan, teknologi, sosial, budaya, dan humaniora, Universitas Brawijaya siap mengembangkan proses pendidikan yang bermutu dan berstandar internasional untuk menghasilkan lulusan berdaya saing global. Untuk menunjang kompetensi dan keterampilan mahasiswa, Universitas Brawijaya menyediakan berbagai laboratorium dengan peralatan yang berteknologi canggih dan modern, termasuk laboratorium lapangan, sehingga budaya penelitian yang kuat terus berkembang ditandai dengan penemuan inovatif yang bermanfaat bagi masyarakat luas. Karya ilmiah yang bermutu dan inovasi diciptakan Sivitas Akademika sebagai wahana pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. Sebagai perwujudan komitmen sebagai World Class Entrepreneurial University, berbagai sarana dan prasarana serta beragam wahana bagi berbagai aktivitas mahasiswa disediakan untuk menjamin terciptanya peserta didik yang unggul dan berprestasi. Banyak lulusan Universitas Brawijaya yang saat ini menempati posisi penting dan berkontribusi nyata di Indonesia maupun di tingkat internasional.
Dari pengajarnya dulu zaman saya kuliah banyak praktisinya, jadi saya ngerasa benar-benar kepake banget, bukan cuma belajar teori tapi prakteknya kita dapat.
Dari pengalaman kuliah yang paling berkesan ya karena saya anak organisasi, jadi ya di kepanitiaan, terus saya di sana belajar tentang kepemimpinan.
Dulu yang depan saya itu Fakultas Peternakan, sekarang udah berapa lantai udah ya, malah ada liftnya, dulu nggak ada.
Dengan semangat kami, Universitas Brawijaya akan menunjukkan kepada dunia pendidikan yang berintegritas dan humanis serta berada pada barisan terdepan dalam pengembangan ilmu pengetahuan dan teknologi. Dengan bangga hati dan penuh percaya diri, lulusan Universitas Brawijaya siap menyongsong masa depan, holding up global future.
Postgraduate Brawijaya University, located in the city of Malang, East Java. We are ready to guide with the various study programs. Environmental and Development Research Management Program, Doctor Program in Environmental Science, a National Defense Insight, the Lemon Studies Master Program.
Mbak Ica, kita mulai ya. Kita mulai sekarang ya. Saya minta Mbak Jeha untuk mulai.
Ya, baik Bu. Terima kasih.
Monggo,
Honorable
Mbak
guests,
Jeha.
ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. My name is Jehan, and I will be your Master of Ceremony for today's guest lecture. I would like to welcome the Honorable Director of Postgraduate Universitas Brawijaya, Profesor Dr. Marjono MPhil, First Vice Director of Postgraduate Bapak Fadilah Putra SOS MSI MPhal PhD, Second Vice Director of Postgraduate Bapak Andi Kurniawan SPI MNSC, at interim for Head of Study Program Master of Women Studies Ibu Wike SOS MSc BPA, Heads of Study Program in Postgraduate Universitas Brawijaya, Head of KJM Coordinator of PSIK, Head of BPJ, Head of BPPM, and Head of IRO. And I also welcome the lecturers and students in master and doctoral programs in Postgraduate Universitas Brawijaya. And I also would like to welcome our keynote lecturer for today, Honorable Professor Patrick Keyzer from Thomas More Law School, ACU, Brisbane, Australia. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you for your warm welcome.
Yes, you're welcome. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining our 3-in-1 lecturing class for Women Studies Postgraduate Universitas Brawijaya today. For today's themes for the lecturer is Overview of Women, Gender, and Disability from Legal Perspective. Start the class for the first remarks. I welcome the Director of Postgraduate Universitas Brawijaya, Professor Dr. Marjono MPhil. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mbak Jehan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Morning, everybody, and nice to see you all here in this room. The Honorable, the Vice Director of Academic Affairs, the Vice Fadilah Putra PhD, the Vice Director of Finance Affairs, Pak Andi PhD, Doctor Science, and also Bu Wike as Head of Study Program, Women Studies, also Bu Kiki from IRO, International Relations Office, and all of the our colleagues here. Nice to see you again in this event, and I'm very proud to have here Professor Patrick Keyzer. Thank you. Welcome to Indonesia again after 2019. I heard from Pak Fadilah and also from Bu Wike, and we hope that the pandemic will be over soon, and we have more better activity after now. Ladies and gentlemen, all of the audience here, on behalf of the Pascasarjana postgraduate study here, we are very proud to have this event. We can share each other our knowledge and experience, and more from that. I really hope that this collaboration still always be continued in the future. And have a nice time. And sorry for the Wi-Fi for today, since yesterday, I guess. So hopefully we can understand from that. Okay, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I think we can open this speech. Thank you very much, and good luck for everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Marjono. I appreciate your warm welcome. Thank you. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and then I will speak to a slide, and then I will have a slide in Bahasa Indonesia, and I hope that the translation is good. So Dr. Rike and others can assist me with that presentation if there are any problems.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen? Can you see my slide presentation?
Yes.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So the topic of today's talk is women, gender, and disability. So there's my my translation. Dr. Rike, will you be reading the translations, or will people read it for themselves?
Yes, I think for this morning, Dr. Rizky Pravitri
Okay.
will be assist you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
But Rizky.
Dr. Wicked, thank you very much. Yeah, that's right. It's perfect, Professor Patrick.
Excellent. Okay. Well, what we'll do is I will keep on going through the slides, and then if there's anything you would like to correct, you let me know. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Perfect.
Thank you. So I'm going to cover 6 topics in this lecture: statistical information, a definition of disability studies, an analysis of the social model of disability, the concept of stigma and disability. I'm going to talk about some materials produced by United Nations Women. And finally, I'll talk about a model that I use often called Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. So here is my slide in Bahasa. So I will talk about statistics, disability studies, the social model of disability, stigma and disability, the United Nations Women Organization, and Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. So the first thing that we need to understand about women in disability is that when the United Nations studied this topic, did a major work on this 10 years ago, they found that the percentage of women with a disability is a lot higher than the percentage of men with disability. So it is 19.2% for women and 12% for men. There are also challenges for women when it comes to the global literacy rate. So for people with disability, only 3% of men are literate. That is, that they can speak and write in their native language. Whereas with women, it's only 1%. Now, this isn't a feature of being a woman. This is a feature of the opportunities that society provides for women, as we'll see in a moment. Although all people with disability experience barriers to employment, men who have disability are 2 times as likely to have employment as women with disability. So again, this is not a reflection of women, but it's a reflection of the society within which women live and the opportunities that women have. And finally, women are more likely to experience violence. Women with disabilities are more likely to experience violence than men with disability. So I'll just leave this slide up for a moment because there's a lot of information in it. Okay. So we have an initial idea of statistics, and research that has been done in Europe, North America, and Australia has shown that more than half of women with disability have experienced physical abuse. compared to only 1/3 of women without disability. Okay, so far so good. So what we have now is we have an understanding of the statistics around the issue of women with disability. The second topic that I'd like to talk about is contemporary disability studies, and this is a discussion of how disability is studied around the world, everywhere, Europe, America, Australia, and how disability scholars think about disability these days. And the answer is it's interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. So as lawyers, we look at things through a legal perspective. However, it's increasingly common for lawyers like us to listen to economists and people from all different parts of public policy and social policy so that we can better understand the context of women with disability. So when we're thinking about disability, we think about many overlapping different types of social science, not just law, but economics, social policy, architecture, feminist thinking, all the different varieties of social policy and public policy thinking that can help us understand this context better. So another point that I think is a very important point when thinking about women, gender, and disability is the social model of disability. So historically, people have thought that people with disability have something wrong with them, and they've taken a medical approach to disability. They've said, okay, you can't see, you're vision impaired, therefore you are to be treated differently than everyone else. And what recent scholarship in the last 30 or 40 years has confirmed is that people with disability only have a disability because society discriminates against them. So if you want a person in a wheelchair to access a building, then you build a ramp. There's nothing wrong with the person who's in the wheelchair. It's the attitudes of people who can walk up the steps that is the problem here. If I walk up the steps every day, and I think that that's okay for people in a wheelchair to be outside the building, then I am the cause of the problem. That's how we should be looking at it. So today we talk about the social model of disability. That is, we don't focus on the person with the disability. Instead, we focus on what we can do in our society to make people have access to buildings and transport and educational opportunities and all of the things that people who do not have a disability take for granted. And that's one of the reasons I'm so happy to be speaking to you about this topic. And in particular, I wanted to pay a tribute to Universitas Brawijaya and its very strong commitment to people with disability, because I know of your PLSD, your your group in Brawijaya and the excellent work that it does for students with disability. So I'm delighted to be speaking to you because I know that Brawijaya's approach to this issue comes from here. They take it very, very seriously. And so it's a great honour to be associated with you and your program. Because I know that you understand that disability is not a justification but just for discriminating against people. Disability means that we need to think about how we organise our university life and everything that we do to encourage people to come to our institutions and to learn. So getting back to the topic of disability studies, which is something that we're all engaged in, we look at law, we look at social policy, we look at politics, we look at cultural factors, and we look at economic factors that define disability and help determine people's responses to that topic. So we're looking at everything. We're looking at all the different types of knowledge that inform what we think about and how we manage our work so that we can better understand how to develop policy for people with disability. Now, disability studies is important because we need to take the stigma away from disability. We need to take the stigma away from impairment and focus on what we can do in society to make people aware of the steps we can take to make the world a better place for people with disability. And here's the translation of that. And I also wanted to acknowledge, as I'm speaking to you, that I've invited a guest to our talk today, Tricia Maloney, who is the director of, is a member of International Women, the International Network of Women with Disability. And Tricia will help me answer the questions at the end of my talk. So she's with us today, and I welcome you, Tricia. So moving to the next. Another thing, another aspect of international disability studies today is we are learning from the experiences of people in different cultures. So we study national perspectives, we study international perspectives, and we study their policies, literature, culture, and history with the aim of placing current ideas in the broadest possible context so that we can learn from each other and encourage and ensure that people with disability get the benefit of knowledge that is produced by people in other countries. So we're interested in what is going on in other countries, what is going on in other cultures, what is going on in different places, so that we can have a better understanding of what we are doing locally and what steps we can take to ensure that people with disability are not discriminated against and have all of the rights that people without disability take for granted. So the question becomes, what does all of this mean for women with disability? And when I was doing the research for this lecture, I came across some wonderful materials that have been produced by unwomen.org. So this is that part of the United Nations, excuse me, that assists women and girls. And they have done a lot of recent work on the topic of women and girls with disability. So, and part of the philosophy of that is nothing about us without us. And that phrase has been known for many years in disability circles, but it's also the title of a book by James Charlton that was published in 1998, which is designed to encourage people to think about when they are working with women with disability, that they should listen to women. They should listen to women with disability to find out what they want. And that has to be the foundation of any research that we do when we're looking at this topic. So tomorrow, when I talk about research methodology, this concept, nothing about us without us, is the foundation of the approach that we should take to research with women with disability. So James Charlton, when he wrote his book, he said that disability oppression is grounded in degradation, dependency, and powerlessness. And he reached that conclusion by conducting interviews with people with disability in countries all around the world. And he said that people with disability are disempowered by people who do not have disability. And I go back again to the example of a person in a wheelchair who is denied access to a building because there's no ramp. If you only have stairs, that means a person in a wheelchair cannot get access to that building. So that means that people who can walk up a staircase have exercising their power to deprive a person in a wheelchair of access to that building. And James Charlton developed his thinking about this work by interviewing people with disability all throughout the world, and reached the conclusion that people without disability are oppressing people with disability by creating social policy, infrastructure, economic policies, politics, cultures, and built environments that deprive people with disability of opportunities to demonstrate that they can do anything. And his philosophy for reform of that context is based on self-determination. And that is that people with disability should have the power to decide what their lives are, what their futures will be, and they should have the power to make the decisions that affect their lives, just like everyone else. So it's about freedom, it's about self-determination, and it's about people with disability making the decisions. I just want to pause there and thank you, Nastiti, for your translations. Thank you. So really the essence of the work of James Charlton, nothing about us without us, is about self-determination. And again, this is an important concept when we look at research tomorrow. So we'll be keeping this concept in mind when we think about how we go about our research. So here is an example of some of the work that has been done by the United Nations Women's Organization. And you'll see that it's about full and effective participation. It's about women having the right, women with disability having the right to full and effective participation in all aspects of social life, including the politics and the governance of themselves. And you'll see that the United Nations Women Organization, and I've included the website at the top of the slide, has produced a lot of information for people, and I have included translations in red ink. These materials are available in English, but you'll see that the work is very recent. So the work has been done this year in 2021, last year in 2020, and 2019. So there's been a lot of recent work designed to support women with disability with international principles, ideas, and toolkits. So you can see, in addition to the policy briefs, which are designed to support their thinking, there are also country support policy briefs for the support of women with disability during the pandemic. And also there is a toolkit at the bottom, a resource kit, Know Your Rights, so that women with disability know what international human rights they have to support them in their work. Okay. And finally, there's additional resources for people during COVID. And there's the link. So, but you can find that, you just go to your Google, and if you type in unwomen.org, women with disabilities, you'll come across this material. I've also included some references from the work of Karen Soldatic, who is an Australian author who writes about women with disabilities. And you're very welcome to share this presentation with people afterwards. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about today is Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. So the purpose of this ladder of citizen participation is to show you what women with disabilities should have or should ask for and should get as a consequence of the human rights that they have as women with disability. In many different contexts, people with disability are manipulated, or they are merely informed about the decisions that are made on their behalf. And of course, what we want to do in all of our contexts, we want to get up as far as possible to a position where, as citizens, we have control of our destiny. So really, this is what we want. We want we want women with disabilities to be setting up the project, to be deciding what should be done, and then going to facilitators for advice, rather than have a situation where some people are controlling women with disabilities. Women with disabilities should control their own destinies. And this is a very challenging, this can be a very challenging set of ideas for people who are in government, because they're used to controlling things themselves. So this is a really useful way of thinking about any situation that you're in, to make sure that you have control as much as possible. So as we go down the ladder, we'll see that you have less responsibility and you have less resources. So if you don't have controlled waga, then you move down kekuasaan yang didelegasikan. So you have the delegated power, right? And then you go down again to kemitraan. Stakeholders have direct involvement in the decision-making process. And then menempatkan, stakeholders have an active role, but the final decision rests with someone else. Okay, so that's when you're being consulted. You've been consulted on the decision. You go down, you've just been informed about the decision, and finally you're manipulated. Okay, so the idea is that you should try and build systems that allow you to start. Maybe you start on the bottom rung of the ladder where you're being manipulated, and you go up, 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 until you control the situation. And this is a useful set of ideas for thinking about how decisions are made. And that is my talk. I just wanted to make sure that that you were with us, Tricia.
Yes.
Are you there,
Yes,
Tricia?
I am here, and I have my video on now.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's Tricia Maloney, and Tricia is part of the international network of women with disabilities, and she used to be the Chief Executive of Women with Disabilities Australia. So she is someone who has a lot of experience in these matters, much more experience than me. And Tricia is also very kindly agreed to answer questions, any questions that anyone may have. And if you would like to send me, put your questions in the chat. Let's see. Let me just make sure. Okay. So I can see that some people have put some questions in the chat. If you would like to put a question to me in the chat in Bahasa Indonesia, then I will use Google Translate to translate that into English. And then I will answer it in English and I will translate it back into Bahasa. It may take us a little bit of time, but I think we should be able to do that. And Tricia is also available if you'd like to ask some questions. So thank you very much for your translations, Nastiti, and for being on hand, Risky. And let's hear some questions. Okay. We have a question from Zulkifli. Yes. What is the legal treatment if a person with a disability violates the law? Can they be sued like a person without a disability? the short answer is in Australia, the answer is yes. However, most parts of Australia have criminal defences that may be available to people who do not know what they are doing is wrong. So if a person with a cognitive impairment or an intellectual disability, if they commit a crime, they can be found guilty of that crime unless they did not understand what they were doing was wrong. And even if they are found guilty, then the sentence, the prison sentence that they may get, or the compensation that they may be required to pay, will be changed because of their disability. And that's a matter for evidence. So lawyers will tender evidence. You might get a psychologist report or a psychiatrist report, and the court will consider that in making its decision. Okay, I'm just going to take that question there and translate it. Bear with me.
Mbak Rizky nggak dengar.
Yes. Okay. So, Rizky, it might be quicker if you.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Did you want to? Can you translate that question from Ali Masudi?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that my microphone didn't work.
No, you're doing well. There's in the chat function. There's a question there from Ali Masudi. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah. But before, probably I want to ask Zulkifli. Is that clear, the answer from Professor Patrick, or you have further question, Pak Zulkifli?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's clear. Thank you, Prof.
Ya, ya Pak. Masih di
Yeah,
mute, Pak. Oh,
it's clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very much.
So we can go to the second question.
Yeah. The next question is from Ali Masudi. The problem about disability is a buzzing word, yeah, at the moment in the life, daily life. How about the politics law in Australia about disability? I think that's the question. Yeah. Bagaimana politik hukum?
Tricia, did you want to answer that? And I'll just add a little bit at the end.
Yeah, okay, if you like. So we have quite strong laws in Australia to support people with disabilities. So we have anti-discrimination laws. So people with disabilities in Australia have the same rights as everybody else and the same responsibilities as everybody else. So people are entitled to full citizenship rights, and that's not only under Australian law but also under international law. So we have federal laws and we have state laws that covers all of that. Patrick, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, look, sure. About 8 years ago, so in 2013, the Australian government created the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and the purpose of that was to take all of the different approaches in the different parts of Australia and have one system. And the purpose of that system is to ensure that people with disability have properly funded supports to ensure that they can participate fully or as fully as possible in social life. So, for example, my nephew has cerebral palsy. He can't move his body at all. He can move his head and he can move one of his hands, but he can't move any other part. So he has people who come in and assist him that are paid for by the government. And that has allowed him to get a job. So now he has a job, he's able to make money and pay taxes, and the tax money that goes to the Australian government, of course, can be used by the National Disability Insurance Scheme to pay for the workers who support him to do what he does. So the idea behind the scheme is to provide financial support to people with disabilities so they can participate fully in cultural life. And just this morning, I was listening to a speech from a Member of Parliament for Western Australia, who is a man with a disability. He is in a wheelchair and he is a member of our Parliament. But I know also in your country that there are people with disability in public life, such as Gus Dur, your president. He had a vision impairment. Abdurrahman Gus Dur. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So he had a visual impairment, but he was someone who was able to participate fully in public life and was accepted by people in Indonesia as a good man and a good leader.
Can I just add a little bit to that, because it's not to take the responsibility from other parts of society. So it doesn't cover access to health, it doesn't cover access to justice. It's really about empowering people. So every other part of society has to take responsibility. So if you're funded to provide services to Australians, you have to provide services to all Australians, and can't just say, well, it's too hard because they have a disability.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tricia and Professor Patrick, for the answer. Probably we can go to the next question. The question is from Jihan. I read about the issue of wheelchair in airplane baggage. A lot of wheelchair was broken from the poor handling from the airport personnel. How law in Australia handle it? Thank you.
It's a common problem. And it's common all over the world. I used to travel a fair bit before COVID, and it's always been an issue. And certainly most of us have travel insurance, and we have to pay extra for it to protect our equipment. But also we are able to take civil action if we need to. The airlines are pretty good in making sure that they do compensate people with disabilities, and you do get priority. But it is one of those things that sometimes somebody's just handled something badly. It's not as common anymore, because I think the airlines are starting to learn if there's an economic impact, then they take notice.
I think also, just adding to Tricia's response, there are many airline companies that do not want to get a reputation for damaging wheelchairs. So if it becomes public in a newspaper or on a television report or even on the internet that somebody's wheelchair has been damaged, then a lot of people get angry with that airline. And usually the airlines want to avoid that kind of negative publicity.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really. Probably Tricia, do you want to add something?
No, I just, that's fine.
Okay,
I think
yes.
that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Bu Wike, any question?
Could I ask Tricia and Patrick?
Yep.
I think there is still common issue in other parts of the world, including in Indonesia, particularly in rural area or isolated area. They still thought that people with disability or women with disability is part of the human or just half human. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's scary. It is scary. So what do you think about what the government should do about this, and what the law will going through with the issue? Because there is still lots consequences about this thought. People will be chained, people will be isolated, not appear in the public life, something like that. So what do you think about this thought? Thank you,
If I can
Patrick and
start,
Tricia. Yes.
if I can start off, because this was very common in Australia years ago, and there are still some issues, of course, and we live in a very ableist society. So we see people with disabilities as a problem rather than as equal citizens. So I've had a disability all of my life. My parents were told, put this one in a home, go away and have more children. And my parents said, no, 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 we're not doing that. So I'm probably more powerful than a lot of other women with disabilities my age. We have a problem with violence against women with disabilities because it's assumed that women with disabilities are a problem. So if a man stays with a woman with a disability, he becomes a hero. So look at him, he must be a good man. We don't believe women with disabilities when they experience violence because that wouldn't happen. Nobody would be so mean. I often go into our rural communities and I find women who have been kept at home all of their lives to keep them safe. And then when mum and dad die, then there's nowhere for those women to go because they've never been taught to look after themselves, to operate in society. So how it changed in Australia was it was listening to women with disabilities who are empowered like me to be able to say, I am standing beside you as an equal. I am not deficient. I am a woman first and I have a disability. So I think that's what we have to do. And one of the important things that I like to emphasize is the need for allies like Professor Patrick, who I consider a great ally to the disability community because he accepts us as people first. And I think that all of us have a role to play in that. And I say that as a woman who's always been what we call mainstream. So I didn't go to a special school. I didn't go to special employment. I worked alongside people. I worked in the public service. And I didn't know anybody else with a disability. And then when I found out others weren't empowered like me, I knew I had to take action. But all of us have a role to play in saying, who have I got in my office who has a disability? Am I making sure they are able to work? Who do I know in my village who has a disability? Am I making sure that they have access to whatever it is? Am I making sure that they get good medical treatment? And things aren't perfect in Australia. Don't ever believe that. We still have a long way to go. Everything is a journey, and I learn more and more every day. So it is each of us, all of us have the responsibility, and our governments too have a responsibility to start looking at what are our legislation, what's our law saying about the rights of people with disabilities to be equal citizens? Are they able to vote? Do we allow people with disabilities into our voting booths, or is it too hard? Patrick, do you want to add something?
Yes. Yes, that was excellent. Thank you, Tricia. I just wanted to add two small points. I think that the best way to make sure that people in rural or remote parts of Indonesia develop a better understanding of women with disability and to break down stereotypes and negative perceptions is for the government to use its power to ensure that women with disabilities have positions in government. Yeah. So I know that the Indonesian disability law requires the Indonesian government to have people with disability working in government. Yeah. So one way that the government can support women with disability is to appoint women with disability to positions in government, in the public service. That's one way, and the other way I think it would be for there to be an education campaign where the Indonesian government shows people in television, radio, internet, and shows people in remote and rural parts of Indonesia that women with disability are wonderful people who can do wonderful things. And, you know, I think Brawijaya University is really showing a lot of leadership by having the PLSD unit, the student unit for people with disability, and it's a model for reform. You know, having this organisation within Brawijaya, it's a model that could be spread out to Malang generally, and then to other places. You know, and not just the big cities, but so that people increasingly understand that women with disability are people who are capable, who can do wonderful things, and should just be given those opportunities. So I think education is really the main thing. And for me, when I first started coming to Indonesia about 25 years ago, and when I first visited Indonesia, I was working with the Australian government and the Indonesian government to talk about intellectual property, so copyright and trademarks and things like that. And back in those days, in the 1990s, no one in Indonesia really knew that much about these ideas. You know, only a few people knew. But now everybody knows. I see the last 25 years making a big difference to how the Indonesian economy operates with intellectual property. And I don't see any reason why in 25 years from now, if everybody works hard, we can teach people about disability and remove the stigma and get people to understand that women with disability are wonderful people and should be given opportunities just like everyone else.
Yes. I think we still need lots of effort to make successful about this. But anyway, thank you so much. Yeah.
Look, my pleasure. I personally, I remember when I first came to Indonesia 25 years ago, and people, you know, some people would say to me, "Oh, you know, Indonesia will never understand intellectual property," and I said, "Well, I don't agree. I think, you know, over time people will learn and they'll understand, and all of these things have happened." So, you know, 25 years ago, the manufacturing economy in Indonesia was quite small, and now it's quite big. You know, there are millions and millions of Indonesian people in middle class now who are in manufacturing jobs, and, you know, a lot of those manufacturing jobs are here in Indonesia because of intellectual property. So I see the same economic change can happen when you create supports for people with disability to be part of the economy, you know, for them to be a full part of the economy, because then you can build the country more and more by using the skills and the knowledge of people with disability. And, you know, I think of all of the people who are participating in today's lecture, because Akmarina and Nastiti are doing the translating. You know, I mean, that expands our ideas, it expands our economy, it expands the knowledge, and means that it's more likely that, you know, one day there will be a person in your government who has a hearing impairment. And then it will be one person, and then it will be 5, and then it will be 10, and then it will be 50, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Lanjut Mbak Risti.
Yes, thank you, Bu Wike. Can you hear my voice now?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, that's good. It works now. Okay. Thank you, Professor Patrick and Tricia. And then probably the next question is about, could you share your experiences how disability organizations in other countries that you know carry out their roles? Because whether it is an obligation to address all disability issues that occur in disability, because in Indonesia, as far as I know, more organizations work for capacity building for economic fulfillment and the case management when case occur. Preventive education is almost rarely done. What should universities and government do for disability organization? Probably it's linked with your explanation before, Professor Patrick.
Yes. Tricia, did you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to start off on this, and certainly there's two types of disability organisations. So there are disability service providers, so people who provide services to people with disabilities, who are the ones who are funded or actually, if you're a privately funded, to provide the help for people to get into society, to get out of bed, or to help with the housework or those things. And the other ones are those that are disabled people's organisations, which are quite different. So they're organisations that are run by and for people with disabilities. So in Australia, for example, we have the Disability Leadership Institute, which is just new. And that was set up in Canberra 5 years ago, and now it's in over 20 countries, because there's a need, people with disabilities found a need to have an organisation that's run by us, for us, and which can then help us to advertise our businesses, to promote leadership, to give opportunities. So I do some coaching and some mentoring of other members of the network. Then there's Women with Disabilities Australia, which provides, so it's really about advocating to government about the things that people with disabilities or women with disabilities need. Then there's First Nations people with disabilities, which is our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Then there's culturally and linguistically diverse people with disabilities. So that is people whose first language isn't English, so that they can have supports that they need. And then there's People with Disabilities Australia, which is the general group. And then there are specific groups. So there's Deaf Australia and Vision Australia, Cerebral Palsy Australia, and all of those other groups. So some of them have specific issues that they work on, and some of them are more general about what are the things that impact on the lives of people with disabilities, and how can we convince government that it should be done a little bit better. So before, Patrick was talking about the National Disability Insurance Scheme. All of those groups contribute to speaking with government and consulting with government to make sure it doesn't only work for government, that it also works for people with disabilities, so that it is a real institution that can benefit not only people with disabilities, but that can benefit Australia by making sure there is that economic impact to make sure that people do get jobs, for example, or their family members who have been looking after them for years are freed from that and are able to get jobs as well. So there's two parts to that. The disability service providers are the ones that do the capacity building and the case management and the direct service delivery. So it's really quite complex. Patrick, did you want to add something to that?
Sure. So just picking up on some of the things that Tricia has said, there are many organisations in Australia who are what I call disability service providers, and they are all funded, well, they tend to be funded by National Disability Insurance Scheme. Okay, so in Australia there's a national scheme which has billions and billions of dollars, and that National Disability Insurance Scheme provides service providers, and then those service providers provide services to people with disability. So before I was talking about my nephew, Daniel, he has cerebral palsy. He's in a wheelchair. He needs help to get out of bed. He needs help to do his personal things. And then he needs to get in his wheelchair and get in the back of the taxi, go to work, do his work, but he needs help getting in and out of his wheelchair and so on and so forth. So there are people that the government pays for who help him. So there's disability service providers. And then the second group that Tricia mentioned is organisations for people with disability. So there is a group of people who, there are groups of people who specialise in people with vision impairment or people with a hearing impairment or so on and so forth. Then there are advocacy organisations, and they're often funded, they get a little bit of funding from the government, and they provide advocacy on behalf of people. And I mentioned before that Tricia used to be the head of Women with Disabilities Australia. So she's a very experienced disability advocate. And then, as Tricia mentioned, there are organisations that specialise in Aboriginal people with disability, people who don't speak English with a disability, and so on and so forth. And then we have, in the government, we have a person called the Disability Discrimination Commissioner. And so if you have been discriminated against on the basis of your disability, you can make a complaint to the Disability Discrimination Commissioner, and they will take steps to resolve your complaint. And also, many organisations have got policies or arrangements in place to support people with disabilities. So, for example, I work at a university. There is a part of my university that specialises in working with students to support them in their learning journey and to remove any aspects of university life that would provide an obstacle to their learning. Much in the same way as at Brawijaya, you have PLSD. You have your organisation that is designed to make learning available to people with disability. We also have units like that in our universities. So hopefully that, the only other aspect of the question which we haven't addressed yet is preventive education. And that is this idea that we should be informing people about disability so that they have a better understanding of it and they don't engage in discriminatory attitudes. And I think the answer, the true answer to that is 50 years ago, if you're a person with disability, you would go to a special school, you would go, you would be kept at home, you wouldn't be given opportunities to participate in what my friend Tricia referred to as mainstream life. So whereas Tricia's parents, for example, said, okay, Tricia's got a disability, but she's going to school just like everyone else. And these days, that is increasingly the case. So unless you have a severe disability, you will be mainstreamed, which means you go into school with everyone else. And I think what's happened over the course of the last 50 years is people who do not have a disability go to school with people who do have a disability, and they discover that people with a disability are just like everyone else. And why treat them differently? Because they're not actually different. You just, they might need a ramp to get into the building, but that doesn't mean that they can't do anything else. You have to remove your discriminatory feelings and embrace the social model of disability and do what you can to support people. And I think now that more and more people with disability have been in the classroom with everyone else, that has practically educated people to understand disability a lot better. So that I find that by the time at law school, if you say, should people with disability be discriminated against? They say, of course not. That's a silly idea. So that education take place. Tricia, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, so what happens now is so different to when I was young. I didn't know anybody with a disability because everybody else were put aside, and I'm really grateful to my parents that they didn't do that. But I'm thinking too about now, it's accepted that if you are researching about disability, that you will have researchers who have disabilities on your staff, that you will have investigators who have a disability. When I was working for police, I worked for police for 10 years as a researcher from 1990 to the year 2000. And the commissioner said to me, could you please become our disability liaison officer? And I said, I have no idea about disability. And he said to me, but you've got one. You've got a disability. You must know. And it was only then that I started to realize that other people didn't have access to what I have access to, that they weren't as powerful as me. And so that's how I got started in doing this work. And now I find wherever I go that there are more and more people working alongside people without disabilities. And in Victoria Police, they asked me to set up an employment program so that all positions that were non-policing roles could be filled by people with a disability. Now, that's our police service, our police force. And that went quite well. And there are still people working in police now who I recruited back then. So I think that half the problem is that once you realize, oh, they're just the same as me, they just can't see, or they're just the same as me, they just can't walk. So I have a university degree. I'm quite a capable researcher. But before I didn't get those opportunities, and things that have changed over time, and they will change over time. And I was in Indonesia, is that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Patrick? 2 years ago. Time just is very confusing at the moment. And I was very impressed with the level of inclusion in Indonesia. So I attended a conference and people with disabilities were there alongside everybody else. So that's the sort of thing that you need to do, which will then make sure that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Patrick and Tricia. Yes, and of course.
Bu Rizky?
Nggak kedengeran?
Bu Rizky bisa? Enggak, Bu Rizky bisa saya tanya? Boleh tanya?
Yes. Yes, please. Yes, please, Bu.
Yeah, thank you. To Professor Patrick and Tricia, I was thinking about children with disability. It is out context from this lecture about women, but I was thinking about children with disability, particularly children with autism or Asperger or ADD. something like that, because it's look like appear in the body of the children is normal. Okay, that's why creating complicated feeling for mother or for the parents. So that's why the parents sometimes desire to put the children on the mainstream school. Okay, not enroll in a special school. So what do you think about the impact of the, is it benefit this mainstream school for the children with mental or learning disability? Thank you.
There are several schools of thought
You
there.
go ahead.
Yeah, so some people think it's really good that we have separate schools for children with autism and children with intellectual disabilities. But it depends, sort of, I've had some parents who insist that their children go to a special school and then realize they're not getting an education. So if they're going to a special school, they must get an equal education. And then what happens when they have to leave school at age 18? Are you being prepared for life outside of the special school? Are you being prepared to enter society? There are some people, so autism is a spectrum. It's a very, very long diagnosis. So you really can't say, I think you should take the advice of the medical experts, the education experts, but also listen to your own instincts as a parent. So if my parents had have listened to the advice that they were given, I would now have probably an intellectual disability because of institutionalization. So you need to think of the child as a whole. What's in the best interest of the child rather than what's going to make me feel better? So philosophically, I think we should have no special schools, but practically, how do we help those children? And I think that an ideal way would be to have the special school and the mainstream school on the same campus so that you can at least mix with other children equally. Thank you.
I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're fine, Patrick. Okay, thank you very much, Tricia, for the answer. And probably the next question from Ikian, talking about equality, is there a disability pay gap? Is there a disability pay gap?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
There certainly is. So people with disabilities are more likely to be paid less than people without a disability, and women with disabilities are more likely to be paid less again. And if you look at the pay gap between men and between women, sometimes that's because of opportunities, right? So people with disabilities don't get the same opportunities as people without disabilities. So they're very often kept on a low level of pay. And also in Australia, we have sheltered workshops where people are paid a tenth of what other people are paid and are expected to be grateful for having a job. So there is definitely a very, very big pay gap. Somebody like me, there is no pay gap because I'm able to fight my way through the system to be able to demand that I be paid the same as everybody else. But there is a pay gap for many people, and people don't often reach the level of senior executive. I have a couple of friends who are senior executives. So I have a friend who's a commissioner. She's a royal commissioner in the Royal Commission into Violence Against People with Disabilities at the moment, but they're very few and far between.
I don't have anything to add to that.
You're fine, Professor Patrick. Okay, thank you. Probably the next question, it's very interesting question, I think. And from Nicholas Samuel, thank you for the outstanding lecture, Professor, and thank you for the heartwarming explanation, Tricia. I would like to ask question, and thanks for the giving me the chance. As a college student, it is very common to see my peers to get sexually harassed. Women, especially women with disability, have experienced it to a whole other level. Oftentimes, I stay silent even though I knew about it. I have to be honest, I am scared to engage in a situation such as that. It's very, yeah. And what can I do to overcome that feeling? Or probably the question is, what should I do if I face this situation? Please.
This is very common. This is very, very common in Australia too. And I always say, so I work a little bit in the family violence sector as well, helping women with disabilities who have experienced violence. And I also trained police around sexual harassment and discrimination in the 90s. So my advice is always to keep yourself safe. That's the first thing. My advice would be distraction, which is to distract people by saying things, oh, have you got the time? Just take it away from that. No woman has, or no person should be experiencing violence. Everybody has the right to live free from violence. That's always in my heart. We certainly have to find common people who think the same way as us. So if I see a woman who's experiencing violence from her partner, for example, if we're in a social setting, I have to be careful because my husband wants to save them. And I have to say, you have to be sure that she's kept safe after you leave. So what I will often do is follow that woman when she goes to the toilet, for example, and just ask her if she's okay and offer her support and tell her where she can get help. As a student, it might be worth starting to find people who have similar thoughts to yourself. So you can say, what are you doing? You know, why do those people do that? Did you see that? Did you see what they were doing? So then there's always comfort in numbers. So if more than one of you feels that way, you feel safer to say, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not a nice thing to say. Patrick, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, look, I think that your advice, Tricia, about making sure that the woman with disability who's being discriminated against or harassed, making sure that she will still be safe after the event is of a vital importance, and it's really good advice. Having said that, if it is a circumstance where you can safely point out to someone that something is happening and it shouldn't be, then of course you should do that. And I think you know, it takes courage to point things out like that. But again, I think Brawijaya is doing a wonderful job with its PLSD, setting up an environment for people with disability to learn. It's not just good for the students with a disability, it's good for the university community as a whole to understand that people with disability are perfectly capable of learning and learning at the university level. And they, just like everyone else, are entitled to engage in their daily activity free from harassment or discrimination. So I think that what you have done at your university is a wonderful model to expand to other places, because again, I think we will help lower the amount of discrimination and harassment the more we educate people about these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Patrick and Tricia. And probably like this event this morning, we can see it was like 90 people, yeah, join this Zoom, probably because of internet connection. We have 60 people in this room. But can you imagine 60 people listening for this lecture this morning? And increase the awareness so we can together build this this awareness at least in Brawijaya Universitas Brawijaya. So probably the
Absolutely.
next question. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And next question, in line with the education area, could you explain more about the implementation of the lecturing? Probably this is the question from a lot of lecturers as well here about teaching and learning activities. If you have students with disability, do they have their rights to comfortable teaching and learning process related to their disabilities? Or probably I will add something, how we as a lecturer, provide something, we don't want to make them feel different or people feel different because their disability situation, but we also want to give, comfortable situation. What do you think, or what your suggestion for this situation? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Tricia, do you want me to go first?
Yep, can you go ahead?
Yeah. So in Australian universities, there are rules and regulations around the provision of material in different formats. So people are entitled to have materials so if they have a visual impairment, they are entitled to have materials that are recorded so they can listen to them. Yeah. And people with a hearing impairment are often entitled to have a sign language interpreter available to them to convey the material that they would hear, or they're able to have a transcript, so a written transcript so they can read it. Yeah. So for example, today we're having a Zoom call. We have a sign language interpreter, Akmarina, and also Nastiti. They're helping us convey the information to people who can't hear me speak, or you, or Tricia. But after this event, there will be a recording of this event, and in an Australian university, they would take that recording and they would turn it into a transcript that the person with a hearing impairment could then read. Yeah. So earlier today in my presentation, I translated my English slides into Bahasa Indonesia so that I could increase understanding of what I'm saying for the benefit of people for whom English is a second language. The same principles apply for accommodating people with vision impairment or hearing impairment. Okay, so you just have to, I find that as a lecturer, I think about how I convey information, and I try and take all the steps that I can to make that information as available as possible to as many people as possible. And I find that if I do that, then I get better educational outcomes, because it means all of the people who are listening to me or reading what I've written will have a better understanding of what it is I'm trying to convey. So I thought I'll pass it over to you now, Tricia.
Well, I suppose for me, it really is about listening to each person and asking what it is they need. So some people are funded to have somebody to take notes for them if they can't do that themselves. It might be that you allow somebody to record the lecture. That's sometimes helpful. But I think for most that I've spoken to, they like to have their notes in advance so that they can read through them. And just be available, sort of just be helpful to people with disabilities. So when I wasn't allowed to go to university when I left school. I probably wasn't smart enough when I first left school. But I went back when I was in my 30s and did my education, and I was working full time at the time. So it took me 9 years to get my degree because I was also with a family and working and all of those things. So I think that each person learns at their own rate. So just be sensitive to people is my answer to that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Wicked, you want to add
Buriski,
something?
I think, yeah.
Yes,
I
please.
think this is the last question.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I think
So,
from yeah.
yeah.
And Prof. John is already on the screen also. So if there is no anyone to ask give a question to Tricia and Professor Patrick, so I think it's end now. But before that, maybe I think so. So and tomorrow will be we'll be going to with Prof. Patrick. Yeah.
All right, and then the closing remark will be from you or from Prof. Marjono? Wika?
I think because Prof. John already on, maybe.
I would be disappear.
No.
Okay,
All
okay.
right.
Before that, I would like to say hello to Tricia Malone. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we are very lucky this morning. We only have 2 hours, probably in this morning, but morning here, still morning, but probably afternoon there in Australia. But we really have a good discussion and a lot of people joining this session, and I believe we all working together to build the awareness, and we spread the knowledge, especially for Universitas Brawijaya and also in Indonesia in general. And before we close this session, probably there is a closing remark from Prof. Marjono. Please, Prof. Marjono.
Thank you, Buriski. This is a wonderful time again. So, well, this is very nice and interesting topic. And also, the audience, there is a best regard from Pak Rector, because I told him that today we have this activity, and then he asked me to deliver the regards from him to all of us. Okay, thank you very much. And I think this is still not enough, so this is why we should continue tomorrow with Patrick, I think. Yes, and if I'm afraid I have another activities, I'm afraid I can join with you. But if there is, well, I don't know how many minutes I would like to say, I would like to have that. All right, and keep safety and keep healthy, and we can do something for our institution, for our family, and also for our nations. All right, by saying Alhamdulillah Alamin, at the moment we close this activity for this morning or this afternoon in Australia. Thank you very much. I would like to thanks for all of the people here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you,
much,
Professor
Marjono.
Thank you, Prof. Patrick. And tomorrow we will see you again about the topic research methodology and ethical conduct in terms of women, gender, and disability issue. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wike.
Thank you very much, Professor Marjono. Thank you, Dr. Wike.
Thank
you, Rizky.
Pleasure.
And
Thank you very much.
Nastici and
Thank you
also
so much.
Akmarina. Thank you for your translations.
Yes, thank you, interpreters. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all the audience as well.
We'll see you tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tricia.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tricia. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow, and thank you all the participants.
Yes.
Thank you, Bu Wike.
Iya, makasih ya, Suwon ya. sudah dibantu.
Mbak Fadila.
Besok dengan Mbak Ica. Thank you Bapak Ibu, Mbak Mas yang sudah hadir. Tomorrow will be again ya. Insya Allah
Mbak
jam
Nastiti,
8 jam 9.
Mbak Nastiti dan Mbak
siapa tadi? Lupa saya.
Mbak
Rai,
Mbak udah hilang.
Mbak Akmarina.
Mbak Nastiti dan Mbak Mirna.
Akmarina.
Marina. Thank you so much ya. Matur nuwun. See you tomorrow.
See you. Pamit ya. Assalamualaikum.
Pamit, bye bye.